So this is what the influencers aren't going to tell you or show you. This is the post-pandemonium revenge travel inflation overhyped version of Tulum.
And your captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. Feel free to move around the cabin.
Hello, I'm Sparkle, your single solo traveling sister, here sharing my tips and adventures to help inspire your next trip. Those of you who follow me on other sites know that I recently took a friend's vacay to Tulum. I did a little vlog about it, so if you haven't watched it, check it out. But since I've gotten back, I've gotten quite a few questions because we've all gotten to know Tulum in recent years as an influencer's paradise. If you scroll through Instagram and TikTok between 2016 to 2021, everybody was in Tulum and it just looked like an amazing place to be. But is that still the case? There are 10 main things that I think you should know before you take a trip to Tulum now. First and foremost, let's start with arriving at the airport. It is important to know that Tulum does not have its own airport, and the closest airport is Cancun Airport, which is an hour and a half up to 2 hours away. A lot of times when we are traveling as tourists, we think that we can arrive at the airport, get an Uber, and head straight to our resort or hotel. Unfortunately, that won't be the case if you plan on traveling to Tulum. You will have to fly into the Cancun airport, and I do recommend that you arrange transportation ahead of time because it can be quite hectic and confusing. At Cancun airport, you will be bombarded with people trying to sell you timeshares, trying to coordinate rides for you, and offering to just kind of take you to Tulum. And that could be a positive thing if you haven't prearranged, but it can also lead to you paying a lot more than you would have had you planned ahead. There are 4 main ways to get from Cancun Airport to Tulum: a rental car, public transportation, private shuttle, or a shared shuttle. And each of these has its own pros and cons. Getting a rental car is going to be your most affordable option. It gives you the most flexibility and the most bang for your buck. However, there's some things you want to be aware of when it comes to a rental car. If you're not familiar with the driving laws in Mexico, or if you're not familiar with some of the legal gray areas that their law enforcement tends to use to coerce people out of paying fines when they've broken the law, then that can be something that's pretty intimidating and you may want to avoid. There is only one main road from Cancun Airport to Tulum, and because their law enforcement tend to know that tourists are going to be driving on that road, they look for unsuspecting tourists. So just be aware of that. Not everyone has this experience, but you don't want to be the tourist that does experience that. The next option is public transportation or the bus. The name of the bus company is ADO. It is a public bus, so obviously that's one drawback, that it's a bus full of people, but it's relatively affordable, $20 for a 2-hour ride. But because it is a public bus, you're not getting dropped off directly at your hotel or your Airbnb. You just get dropped off at the bus station, and then you still have to make additional arrangements to get to wherever your accommodations are. So just be mindful that they make multiple stops. I think they stop in Playa del Carmen and maybe Cozumel. Next, you have the shuttle option, and the shuttle options range depending on what your price point is. You could have a shared shuttle. The shared shuttle can be with strangers, it can be with friends, it can be with other people who are staying at your resort. And you could have a private shuttle. So we opted for a private shuttle. There were 7 of us. 5 of us arrived at the same time and took a shuttle directly to Tulum, and we were the only 5 people in the shuttle. Shuttles can range anywhere from $50 per person to upwards of $100 per person. But again, it is a lot more of a comfortable ride. You don't have to worry about your bags. You don't have to worry about making multiple stops. You're going to get dropped off right at your door, but that is going to cost you a little bit more. So whatever your comfort level is, just know that these are going to be the options. Speaking of transportation, let's talk about transportation when it comes to getting around in Tulum. Now, Tulum is still in the developmental phase in terms of infrastructure, and this is why I say the tourism is outpacing the development, because most of the roads are unpaved. There are very few sidewalks The roads that are paved don't have designated lanes, so traffic can be extremely chaotic. These are your options when it comes to trying to get from point A to point B. Again, you have the rental car option, so you're driving yourself. That comes with a lot more flexibility and will probably be your most affordable option in terms of once you break it down from day-to-day expenses. However, again, keep in mind that if you are not familiar with Tulum, with Mexico driving laws, you could end up paying more in fines than the car rental itself cost. There isn't a lot of parking in the main areas of Tulum, so you end up having to pay for valet or paying for somebody to park your car, which still ends up costing just as much as a taxi. So they really push you in a direction of taking taxis. The taxi service is something that is very profitable for Tulum, and they don't give you a lot of other options. Uber and Lyft are not an option, so taxis are pretty much a monopoly. They say Tulum is a bike town, and so me living in Southern California, when I think of a bike town, I think of an area that has designated bike lanes, safe areas for people to walk and ride bikes that are not going to be right next to the vehicle traffic. That's not the case. Yes, there are a lot of people riding bikes in Tulum, but it just doesn't seem safe based off of what I'm used to in terms of an area that's designated for bikes and pedestrians. Like I said before, there aren't any sidewalks, there aren't any designated vehicle lanes, let alone bike lanes. If there were, I didn't see any. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you experienced a designated area for people on bikes to get around, because I did not see that. And then last but not least are the taxis. So it is important to note that you won't just be able to open an app on your phone and request a taxi. You can hail a taxi. They're going to be in all the tourist areas, just kind of lined up, similar to how they are at most airports, just a bunch of taxis around. However, if you're staying a little bit out of the way, you will probably have to coordinate with your host to get a taxi. I didn't feel 100% comfortable with this just because I like to have a little more freedom when it comes to transportation. There's one taxi company, and they say it's a taxi union, but you can read between the lines and kind of see who's probably running the operation when it comes to these taxis. When it does come to transportation in Tulum, you should be mindful that there are 3 main roads. So when these roads are backed up, you're literally just sitting in traffic. There is one road going all the way down the beaches. There's one road going to the town and one road leaving out of Tulum, so going back towards Cancun or towards the airport. So it's just not a lot of options in terms of getting around. And so that's why I say I wouldn't recommend walking or riding a bike, because these cars get backed up and there's nowhere for you to go. Another thing you should note about the taxis is that there is no set price. These taxis do not have meters that you can see like taxis in the United States have. When you get in a taxi in the United States, they start the meter. You can see how your fees are adding up. And then when you get out of the taxi, you pay the fee that is showing on the screen. So there are no surprises. In Tulum, the taxis do not operate like that. You can try to negotiate before you get in. I would say on average, it's about $50 to $75 to get from the main strip to the outskirts of Tulum. I think they call it the town, but that price can fluctuate. Since you have nothing to compare against this one company that's operating all the taxis, you pretty much have to pay whatever they say it costs. With that being said, let's get into the prices. Most people are attracted to Tulum as a Mexico destination because when you think of a Mexico getaway, you think of a good bang for your buck. You think of warm tropical weather, serene beaches, and delicious food, all at a bargain price. And when I say bargain price, I mean comparison to other tropical destinations in the Caribbean, Hawaii, and around the world. Tulum does not fall into that category. Tulum is one of the most expensive vacation destinations I have ever been on. And what you're getting with tourism as a whole, the value is not justified in the price. Let me explain. When you travel to London or Dubai or Tokyo, you're getting first class experiences. It is pricey, but you're getting first class experiences. In Tulum, you are in the jungle, it's underdeveloped. The accommodations are very limited, have very limited amenities, but you are still paying 4 or 5-star prices across the board. I don't quite understand how or why they came up with their prices. I'd love to hear some feedback from other travelers on how these price points in Tulum are established. Is it just supply and demand, or is it just a price that they know American tourists are going to pay? A lot of the Tulum guides and travel vlogs that I watched from 2 or 3 years ago had a different impression. It did not seem like it was as pricey during that time. So I'm wondering again if this is just due to inflation or if something has changed in recent years to where the prices have skyrocketed. It is also important to be mindful as you're budgeting for your trip quite a bit. So a lot of things that I looked up online and tried to get a ballpark budget of what I would spend while I was there, that budget went out the window immediately. The prices do fluctuate, so they kind of decide in the moment what they want to charge you. A lot of times you won't see prices posted anywhere online or even in stores. This gives me scam vibes. I know that international cultures do tend to haggle and negotiate more than we do here in the United States, but you still have some sort of general idea of what something should cost. I didn't have any idea of what a fair price for most things were in Tulum. So like I said, my budget kind of went out the window. Another example of that are the tours and excursions. Now, when you go on a vacation, of course, you want to experience the tours and excursions. That's a big part of your vacation. But like I said, you want to kind of budget, because some tours can be $150 per person. Others can be $20 or $30. Even if you do find a tour online, whatever price you see posted online, just know that they're going to charge you more. The tours have a lot of hidden fees. I'm not quite sure why that is. None of it made sense to me. So again, let me know if you have any clarity on it, but it just seemed like they looked what people were paying in the United States and slapped a similar price tag plus 15% on top of it. So there are a lot of hidden fees with the tours and excursions. They charge you extra if you have a professional camera, and they consider a GoPro a professional camera. So anything other than a camera phone, they will charge you extra. If you're recording with your phone, they don't care. But for some reason, if you pull out another type of camera or device, they're going to charge you like an extra $5 to $10. So here's another example. We booked a tour to Chichen Itza, and I think we paid $60 per person. The exact same tour, making the exact same stops on the exact same day for the exact same amount of people in the exact same amount of time. We saw other prices for $80, $90, $120 to $150 per day. And they weren't offering anything additional in the tour. However, we went with the cheaper option. We paid $60, and throughout the day, there were all these additional hidden fees. The cenotes was supposed to be included in the tour. However, when we went to the cenotes, there were extra fees. You had to pay a fee to get in. You had to pay a fee to get a life jacket. You couldn't get in without a life jacket. So you had to pay an additional fee for a life jacket. So again, if you're paying a flat fee thinking a trip to the cenotes is included, but then you get there and realize, and you're being told that you can't get in unless you have a life jacket, and then you have to pay extra for the life jacket. Why wasn't the cost of the life jacket included in the visit to the cenote? And so last but not least, when it comes to the prices in Tulum, maybe most important is you want to be aware that Tulum is very cash heavy. With the prices fluctuating as much as they do, and it being almost impossible to have a set budget because you have absolutely no idea how much things are going to cost, you want to have enough cash to be prepared. But again, that's almost impossible as well because you don't know how much cash is enough cash. This is also one of those things that were a little bit perplexing for me, because if you know you have a heavy tourist area and people are coming from all over the world with all different types of currencies, you would think taking credit cards would be something that's a lot more common, but it's not. And again, this adds to who's probably behind the coordination of the Tulum experience. And it rhymes with the farfail. So just be mindful of that. Another inconvenience when it comes to transactions in Tulum is not only do a lot of places not take credit cards and you have to pay in cash, but it's hard to find an ATM. ATMs are few and far between, and when you do find one, because everybody is taking out cash, they will sometimes be out of cash. So just be mindful of that. I ran out of cash within like the first 2 days, but luckily I was traveling with people who were more than prepared. As prepared as I like to be when I travel, that part I just wasn't prepared at all. Next is Tulum Beach. Tulum is a beach town. When you look at the pictures on social media or scroll online, you see all of these beautiful, scenic, bohemian beach jungle views. So people want to go for the beach. You know, it's a relaxing vacation near the Caribbean. It's important to know that there are no public beaches. Perplexing yet again. You know, tourists are coming here for the beach, yet there's very limited public access to the beach. In order to get to the beach in Tulum, you have to go to a beach club, to a private residence, or to a restaurant, which most of the restaurants are beach clubs, to access the beach. I did see online that there are a couple of very obscure public access to the beaches. However, be aware that if you're just strolling down the beach, someone will walk up to you and say, hey, where are you going? Meaning you need to be going somewhere to spend money. Don't think you're just going to spend a free day at the beach. This was odd to me because, again, living in Southern California, where people come here to go to the beach all the time who don't live in the area, you can pitch a tent, roll out a blanket, and just relax on the beach for free. You don't have to be spending money somewhere to go to the beach. That's not the case in Tulum. So if you think that you're just going to take your family to the beach and just hang out and watch the ocean waves, that's not going to happen. Now, luckily, most of the beach clubs are pretty affordable. You know, if you plan on grabbing lunch that day anyways, you can just pay that money at a beach club or at a beach restaurant and then access the beach from there. But again, you never know what someone's budget is. And if most people consider the beach a free activity and you end up spending $20 or $30 just to get to the beach, that can be a bit of a bummer. When it comes to Tulum Beach, it is pretty much all one long stretch of beach. You may refer to each beach club as its own private beach, but again, it's all one long stretch of beach. This is important to note because, like I said, people will come up to you and kind of say, hey, where are you going? Or where are you headed? If you are just kind of strolling down the beach. So if you pay to go to Taboo, you need to be in the area near Taboo. If you wander down too far past Taboo, they will say, hey, this is a private beach and you don't have permission to be here. That did happen to us. We were just kind of strolling down the beach and somebody came up to us and said, this is for our guests only. But within that long stretch of beach, keep in mind there is a North and South Tulum Beach. So the North Tulum Beach is going to be more of the relaxed beach day atmosphere, whereas South Tulum Beach, you're going to have more day clubs, more beach clubs, more of the lively nightlife and kind of upbeat tourist atmosphere. You also want to keep in mind that a lot of the restaurants and beach clubs and even the accommodations that you see once you get to Tulum, you don't see online. A lot of the establishments in Tulum do not have an online presence. Again, another thing that was very odd to me because you're a very popular tourist destination, yet I would say 60 or 70% of the establishments have no online presence whatsoever. So when you're looking at pictures of Tulum online, you notice that you see people at the same places over and over because those are literally the only places that pop up online. And those places are all owned by the same group. All these other small places that have delicious food, great drinks, good atmosphere, they're wonderful places, but you'll never find them online. So as a tourist or somebody who's never been to the area, if you're trying to research ahead of time and look at some options and see how far it is, and, you know, again, do a little research so you can be prepared, a lot of this stuff just won't pop up. Maybe you can find some of this stuff on different people's travel vlogs, but in terms of just doing a Google search or a Yelp search, you're going to reach a dead end. Lastly, on the beach, again, because most of the areas are privately owned, during the time of year that we went, it was a massive amount of seaweed. I had never seen so much seaweed in my life. It was very much a turnoff. I went in the rainy season, which I don't recommend, and I'll get into that in just a second. So I don't know if they just weren't expecting tourists to come during certain times of the day or during this time of the year, but the seaweed to me made me want to not be on the beach. It was just almost knee-high mountains of seaweed that needed to be cleaned, and it was just sitting there for the most part. All right, so number 4 is the underdevelopment of Tulum. Again, I know that Tulum has grown in popularity tremendously in the last 4 or 5 years since the pandemonium. Everybody felt like Tulum was the place to work remotely. So I understand that maybe the development of the area is still catching up to the tourism. But again, when you're charging people 5-star prices, there needs to be a level of comfort that comes with that. And you don't get that in most places. Most of the roads are unpaved, so you may be on your way to this beautiful luxury villa, but the road there is very rocky with very deep, dangerous potholes, and it makes you very uncomfortable just driving around. This is another reason why I wouldn't recommend getting a rental car, because it just seems dangerous. On top of that, when it comes to the city planning or lack of, there are mountains of trash everywhere. So not only are the roads unpaved, there are just mountains of trash throughout the city. Not in overflowing trash cans, there are overflowing trash cans, but trash that has been brushed out of the road to the side of the road and is just heaped up and in mountains. And again, I keep going back to the pricing of everything because I live in Southern California. So here in Southern California, things are very expensive because there's a lot to pay for. People have to pay for the price of living. You have to pay taxes for people to clean up the streets, to try to fill the potholes. Yes, there are still tons of potholes in Southern California, but you know where your tax dollars are going. It's not clear where this money is going in Tulum. Obviously, the cost of living is relatively cheap, so where is all the rest of the money going? And lastly, when it comes to the town of Tulum as a whole, it's just not very scenic. It's just not a very beautiful place as a whole. Yes, it does have this bohemian jungle aesthetic, and every establishment that you go into does keep that same aesthetic with bamboo, with natural elements drawn in, the beach vibes, the linens, the rusticness. But once you get out of the main touristy strip, like I said, it's either brand new luxury buildings being built, or it's very run down. There's no in between. Number 5, it's important that you are aware of the service issues. Now, when I say service, I mean cell phone, internet, Wi-Fi service. It's all very spotty. I know I am repeating myself, but knowing that Tulum gained popularity during the shutdown when no one was traveling and everyone was working from home, and we're a few years out from that time in the world, I would think that that aspect would be a little more developed, but you have almost no cell service in most places in Tulum. Very odd. Even if you have a SIM card from Mexico, the cell service is very spotty. So that's something that you need to be aware of. If you don't know much about the area and you want to hop on and Google something or search something, even do Google Translate if you're trying to communicate with somebody, these things can be a hindrance as a tourist and as a traveler. So cell service was very spotty. Even when we were at our Airbnb and connected to the Wi-Fi, service was just very spotty. We were trying to WhatsApp each other and messages weren't going through until like hours later. With that being said, I remember watching a review that said Google Maps was unreliable. In my experience, Google Maps was pretty reliable when we did have the correct address. I will say some of the places that we put in, the actual address was different, but when we did have the correct address, we were able to give it to the taxi driver and use Google Maps, and the taxi driver was able to get us directly to that location. So it felt like that has improved over the years. But again, that's if you are in an area where you have cell service or Wi-Fi. There are no guarantees. Next, let's talk about where you should stay when you go to Tulum. There are two main areas that you will find most of the properties, if you can find them online, and that'll be the beach area or the town area. The beach area, like I just described, is the more highly touristy area with very high prices. Most hotels in that area are gonna run you a couple of $100s a night upwards from there. And if you're staying 1 or 2 days, it may be worth it because that way you can avoid renting a car and just kind of walk to where you want to go. But if you're going to be there for an extended period of time, that's going to definitely eat away at your budget. So the other option is in Tulum town, where you get a lot more for your money, but a huge inconvenience of going back and forth to the main area because there's not much to do in Tulum town. So your day is going to be spent basically trying to get transportation to the main strip or the beach area. And if you're paying $70 each way, that can be $150 per day, which is about what you would pay for a hotel to stay in that area. Since Tulum has grown in popularity, it has become a little bit of a resort bubble. So most of the hotels are going to be resorts. So they will have restaurants attached to them. They will have spas and other accommodations. There are pros and cons with this because it does take away a little bit of the personality of a location. But with that being said, in combination with the underdevelopment, there's not a lot of personality outside the main strip. So it's not like you're going to run into a bunch of locals or be able to walk around and just kind of see what life is like in Tulum outside of tourism. Most of the life in Tulum is circulated around the tourism. So when is a good time to go to Tulum? That's a good question, and that's a question I didn't ask myself before going. I just assumed that since it was summertime, the weather was warm, it's a great time to be in Mexico, and I was wrong. We went in July, and that is not the time you want to go. It was extremely hot, and when I say scorching hot, it was scorching hot. It was hotter than Las Vegas. It was not a pleasant weather condition on most days. When we first got there, like I said, it was scorching hot. It did rain on and off for multiple days. And I would say after it rained a bit, it did cool down. But then you have to deal with the humidity and the rain. So it was quite a bit to navigate. The best time to go to Tulum would probably be during the winter months, or the months where we're having winter here in the United States. So I would say October to December would probably be the peak travel months, but a drawback to that is that everybody is going during that time. So it's going to be pricier to find a hotel or an Airbnb. The accommodations would be limited, and just the prices of everything is going to go up. So just be aware of that. Next, I want to give you the heads up on expectation versus reality. I really wish somebody had curbed my expectations a bit more when it came to Tulum, because I was expecting this beautiful, serene, scenic paradise, a relaxing vibe at a budget-friendly cost. And I didn't really get that. It definitely, when they say Tulum is the new Miami, it's definitely the new Miami. It's just as much hassle and politics and kind of that bougie, you gotta know the right person or grease a couple of palms to get any sort of service. And that just rubbed me the wrong way. For what we were paying and what we were getting, it didn't feel comparable. So I would recommend that you adjust your expectations. You're scrolling through these beautiful photos and videos and reels online. It just looks like an absolute paradise. And there are some aspects of it that are absolutely stunning. But when you get there, you realize it's all manufactured. There's nothing naturally beautiful or paradise worthy in Tulum. All of the all worthy aspects of Tulum are man-made and manufactured to look that way. Additionally, you don't want to compare Tulum to other parts of Mexico. So if you've been to Mexico before, which most people have, if you've been to Playa del Carmen, Cozumel, Puerto Vallarta, Tijuana, you have a certain idea of what a weekend in Mexico or a vacation in Mexico or a Mexico getaway will consist of. Tulum is going to challenge those expectations quite a bit, so just be prepared for that. Next, when it comes to expectations versus reality, you want to be prepared for the Instagram photo opportunities that everybody takes advantage of when they do go to Tulum. So all of those same places that you see all over your feed, where everybody is taking those pictures, they're easy to find. Now, those places were easy to find online for sure, but keep in mind that everybody is going there. So there is usually a line. Again, we went in the off season and it was rainy when we did most of our sightseeing, so there wasn't as much of a line. And that's one reason why I do enjoy traveling in the off season most of the time, is because you don't have to deal with the crowds as much. But this is important because this can throw off your schedule. If you're only in Tulum for 2 or 3 days and you're spending a full day standing in multiple lines like you're at Disneyland, that can throw a wrench in your plans. Lastly, it's important to be aware that Tulum is going through a bit of an identity crisis. I think Tulum was originally kind of like a hippie paradise. People went there for yoga retreats, for spiritual awakenings. It was like a more Latin version of Bali, but it was more low key, probably before 2015. Now, in the past 5 or 6 years, the popularity has soared, and I do think it's having a bit of an identity crisis. It seems to me that it's trying very hard to appeal to the influencer crowd, to the party crowd, to the would-be Miami type of crowd, more so than the bohemian, spiritually in tune and spiritually enlightened folk. With that being said, let's talk about the nightlife. Now, that is one thing that I feel Tulum got right. The nightlife is one to be reckoned with when it comes to vacation experiences. I've heard people say it's still not on par with Cancun. I've never been to Cancun myself, so I can't speak to that. But I will say during the day, mostly I was confused. I was perplexed just trying to get around and do basic things like go to the beach. But at night, they understood the assignment. Everywhere you go is going to be a vibe. There is no shortage of places to get drinks, get hookah, get great, delicious food. Tulum comes alive after dark. Again, when you're doing your research online, you will find that there are 2 main groups that kind of monopolize most of the restaurants, the lounges, the clubs, etc. in Tulum. So again, a lot of those spots, those trendy spots that everybody goes to with the sparklers, they're all owned by the same group. And there's a secondary group that owns most of the lounges, the hookah spots. So are these groups the same, ultimately the same person? Who's to say? If you're not a nightlife person, there are still quite a few activities to choose from during the day, but most of those activities are going to be your standard vacation activities that you can pretty much do anywhere. It didn't seem like there was any daytime activities other than going to the Mayan ruins and the cenotes that was specific to Tulum. So most of the excursions were boat rentals, snorkeling, ATV riding, and all of the kind of trendy things that people are doing on vacation now. I don't really enjoy those things. Again, it depends on the group I'm with, but if it's something that I can do literally anywhere, then I would rather not do it on vacation. I like to have experiences that are specific to that location. So with that being said, I wouldn't suggest you stay in Tulum more than 3 days. We were there for a full 7 days, and 2 of the days got rained out, and we still pretty much saw everything we needed to see and did everything we needed to do. and spent a full day in Yucatan. I would say 3 days is more than enough to see what you need to see in Tulum, Mexico. And last but not least, I wanted to share some alternatives to Tulum, because sometimes when we're thinking of vacation, we don't want to put a lot of thought into it, so we kind of default to the places that we see all over our timeline. And that is how some destinations are overrun with tourism and not prepared for the influx in tourism, is because of social media. So if you're interested in going to the Riviera, but not quite sold on Tulum, maybe you should consider Playa del Carmen. While Cancun is still pretty touristy and party central, Playa del Carmen can be a more low-key option, but still give you what you need as a tourist. It's easy to access, it's more developed, it still has the cultural aspects, but still pretty trendy, and you can do a day trip to Tulum if you desire. It's also a lot cheaper, and why not get more bang for your buck if you can? And then to top it off, I'll give you a bonus. Who is Tulum best for? Is it for solo travel? Is it for couples? Is it for families? Is it for friend vacay? In my opinion, I think Tulum is a great place for a friend vacay. If you're celebrating a bachelorette or a 21st birthday, or you're on spring break from college, or you're just wanting to get together with your girlfriends or guy friends, I think Tulum is an amazing place for that. It can also be great for a vacation if you just want to go with your boo and have a couple of drinks for a quick getaway. I don't recommend it as a solo traveler. Again, navigating, getting from the airport to Tulum, or just getting around in Tulum, can be quite exhausting for someone on their own. And I also don't recommend it for families. I think it's way too expensive. There aren't a lot of family-friendly activities or even restaurants, so I don't recommend it for families either. However, if it's just you and a group of friends, 1 or 2 friends, and you want to go for 3 or 4 days, I do think you will have a great time. All right, that wraps up my 10 things that I think you should know before traveling to Tulum now. Let me know in the comments if I left anything out or if your experience was different. And if you like these travel tips, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.